Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. In the book of Ecclesiastes, we read the famous observation about life. There is a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. This comes as one verse in a series of verses expressing the various situations in life that give cause for either some action or some emotion. Each of these verses consists of two examples of contrasting acts or contrasting emotional expressions, with each set of contrasts intended to represent the opposite of its counterpart. In the verse we just quoted, cry is contrasted to laugh, and mourn is contrasted to dance. These seem to be distinct times in life, with the idea being that the time for one is not the time for the other. This much is obvious. It is hard to imagine somebody taking issue with this famous observation from this profound book. We have all experienced these moments, and we are all aware of the contrasting nature of our actions and emotions. But the question could be asked, is there ever a time in which both of the contrasting acts or emotions are called for simultaneously? Is such a thing even possible? Could there ever be a time for laughing, which is also a time for crying? Could there ever be a time for mourning, which is also a time for dancing? It's a good bet that the initial reaction of many people to this question would be that such an overlap of emotions is impossible. But it's also a good bet that after a bit of reflection, many of those same people would say that such a thing is indeed possible. It's simply a matter of circumstances and attitude. We are complex creatures and we have complex thoughts and feelings. One never really knows in which directions their emotions will lead them, nor can they ever be entirely sure where their thoughts will take them. When it comes to imagination, that magnificent wild card of the mind, we really haven't a clue on what road it will send us. But with regard to the will, we believe we are on firmer ground. We believe that our choices are securely within our hands and that the choices we make are exactly what we intend and desire. But we all know from countless experiences that this is anything but the case. Our minds are truly who we are, but it frequently seems that the mind is under the control of another mind. We are subject to the whims of the things that happen to us. A significant event in our lives can send us reeling at light speed away from the secure path we thought we were on. A fleeting vision or a passage in a book can put us on an emotional high or low that was the last thing we expected to experience. With such complexity, is it any wonder that we might find ourselves in a situation in which we might want to both laugh and cry? Isn't it possible that we genuinely want to mourn something, but at the same time we feel the urge to dance for joy? One can read these verses in Ecclesiastes with this possibility in mind. There is a time to mourn and a time to laugh, and it could be that they occur simultaneously. They normally occur as distinct events in very distinct circumstances, but that needn't be the case. A perfect example of this is found a couple of verses earlier. Quote, a time to plant and a time to uproot plantings. Hasn't every gardener experienced these needs coming both at distinct times and at the same time? This is life, and nobody said it was simple. This week does not have a regular parsha. Instead, we read the traditional parsha for the Shabbat that occurs in the middle of a week-long holiday. In this case, of course, the holiday is Sukkot, which began this past Monday night and ends this coming Tuesday night in Israel and Wednesday night elsewhere. The end of the holiday is called Simchat Torah, which has been for well over 1,000 years the time for the celebration of the completion of the Torah. Thus, it happens that this podcast could cover the section we read on Shabbat or the final parsha of the Torah, which is read in the middle of the coming week. We could also discuss the book of Ecclesiastes, which is read in Ashkenazi synagogues on this very Shabbat. But we've already covered some of that, so let's look at the other two. The parsha that is read on this Shabbat mentions all of the pilgrimage festivals of the Torah, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. In addition to that, it gets into a short section in which Moshe felt bold enough to ask Hashem to show him aspects of the divine reality that were not normally accessible to the human mind. It happens that Hashem granted him a portion of this request, but distinctly told him that certain aspects of it were impossible for him to experience. The famous expression for this is, quote, man cannot see me and live. It seems that the existential chasm between human beings and God is profound enough that even one such as Moshe, who had experienced the epitome of what a person can experience in the divine realm, was unable to fathom God to the ultimate depths. There are certain things that we simply cannot know or understand as long as we are bound to the limitations of the mind. As far as the final parsha of the Torah is concerned, it is called Zot HaBracha. That two-word phrase means this is the blessing. It is a title that introduces a fairly short parsha, which consists of only two parts. The first, which is what the title is all about, concerns the blessings Moshe gave to each of the tribes of Israel prior to his death. After a short introduction, Moshe blesses each of the tribes with the strange exception of one. Some of these blessings are a few verses long, and some take up only one verse. Some are obvious blessings in the true sense of the word, and others seem more like what we might call mixed blessings. Why Moshe chose to do this is a matter of interpretation. The blessings are not easy to understand, as is common for the more poetic sections of the Torah. After the final blessing, there are some closing verses that are puzzling in both wording and their intent. All in all, this section probably leaves more questions than answers. The final chapter of the Torah deals with the death of Moshe. He is told to ascend a mountain called Nebo on the eastern side of the Jordan River and to die there. He was granted a prophetic vision of the entire land of Israel, to which he was once again reminded by Hashem that he couldn't go there. There is a certain bittersweet quality to this final chapter. It is almost impossible to not feel sad reading about the death of Moshe and also about the finality of the decree imposed upon him to never set foot into the promised land. But this is juxtaposed against the vivid description of the life that he led, attaining the ripe old age of 120 and never losing his strength and vitality. His life was about as successful as a life could be, even though he faced many trials and tribulations. In the end, the Israelites were left with a capable leader to succeed Moshe and to bring his mission to completion. But the Torah stresses that there would never be another prophet like Moshe, who had experienced Hashem directly and powerfully. This year's Simchat Torah celebration will also have a bittersweet tinge to it. On the one hand, it marks the end of 2 years of war that has probably been the most traumatic extended period in the history of Israel. For those who lived through this has been a marathon of ups and downs, sometimes seeming like victory was right on the doorstep, and other times seeming like the war would go on forever. The population of the country has been divided almost like never before, and almost everyone was tormented by social and political questions which would test the strength of the most determined and the most faithful. October 7th was a few days ago. When it came, none of us knew if the war would end in a few days. We were all guessing and wondering how things would play out and how whatever happened would affect our future lives. This morning, we all awoke to the news that Hamas had accepted the agreement to end the war, at least to whatever degree Hamas accepts anything. Even now, with this dramatic news, nobody here really knows what tomorrow will bring. Will Hamas actually release any live hostages? Will they release them all? Will any of the dead hostages' bodies be located and brought back to Israel? Perhaps even more important than these life or death questions is the more distant question of will the war start up again, or will Hamas agree to give up their arms and their power in the Gaza Strip? Even more distant than that is the question of what will be in the Strip when there is a new power structure there. Will Israel finally be free of this perpetual menace, or will it continue in some other form? Then there's the further question of the Middle East in general. How will things play out here, and what sort of prospects for genuine peace are there? Nobody knows the answer to any of these questions. It is quite amazing. Even as many people are celebrating with dances and jubilation, those very people know that this all might be a cause for mourning. Within the mind of every single Israeli are all of these questions, and regardless of their opinion on the ceasefire agreement, they are all very aware that it could all go up in smoke at the first sign of problems. I personally am torn by my own feelings over this news. On the one hand, I am relieved that the war may finally be coming to an end. Certainly cause for laughter and dancing. But on the other hand, I am extremely unsure about the future and cannot escape occasional feelings of dread that this was all a big mistake. The bottom line of all this is that every blessing is somewhat mixed, and every cloud has a silver lining. We cannot know the future because this is the domain of God alone, and we are not privy to truly see what God will bring about, at least as long as we remain human beings. But we can feel a sense of purpose in life, that we have been entrusted by God as the spiritual and physical beings who are capable of fathoming, to one degree or another, the complexity of life and the vast collage of its emotional ups and downs. We have been charged with making choices over the course of our lives that would confound an angel. We can think thoughts the most advanced computer could only envy if it possessed even a fraction of the human capability of envy. And we can feel emotions those computers couldn't even dream of, even if they possessed the imagination necessary to dream. Perhaps it is appropriate to close with another verse from that remarkable series at the beginning of Ecclesiastes. There is a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build. We have lived through such times and have come to recognize that the opposite demands of the time are not necessarily all that contradictory. Sometimes life demands of us that we do and live both. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sukkot Sameach.